Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show engineered to take a complex stack of sources, articles, research, history, and news, and distill it into profound, actionable knowledge for you.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into one of the most mythologized places on Earth, a location that, for the average Western listener, exists less as a geographical reality and more as, well, a philosophical concept. Timbuktu.
Timbuktu. It really is the ultimate metaphor for the middle of nowhere, isn't it? Our sources show that English dictionaries have formally cited it as a synonym for faraway place since 1863.
Right, it's the edge of the world.
The edge of the known world, steeped in this golden mystery. And yet this metaphorical status is so strong that we actually have data showing how much people doubt it even exists.
We do. It's pretty startling. There was a 2006 survey that showed 34% of young Britons didn't even believe Timbuktu was a real city.
A third of people. Wow.
And that tension between the myth of the lost, mysterious Golden City and the documented historical reality, that's what we are here to unpack today. Because historically, Timbuktu was never the edge of the map. It was the absolute, dynamic center of trade, wealth, and scholarship for medieval West Africa.
So our mission is to move beyond that metaphor. We're synthesizing everything we have. 16th century eyewitness accounts, like from Leo Africanus, geographical data, economic history, and maybe most urgently, recent UNESCO reports and updates on the security and climate crises Timbuktu is facing right now.
It's a phenomenal story of a city that, against just overwhelming environmental and political odds, managed to create and sustain one of the world's great intellectual centers. And its citizens are still fighting to make sure that legacy survives.
Okay, let's unpack this. Timbuktu's power, it seems, was dictated entirely by its geography. What was it about this specific, seemingly isolated spot that allowed it to become the nucleus of all that commerce?
The location is the absolute key, and it's a geographical compromise, really. Timbuktu sits on the southern fringe of the Sahara, only about 15 to 20 kilometers. That's 9 to 12 miles north of the Niger River.
That distance seems deliberate?
Oh, it was strategic. It placed the city close enough to the river for water and transport, but critically, it kept it safe from the annual massive flooding of the Niger.
So close enough to be connected, but far enough to stay dry. It's like the perfect junction point for two totally different economic worlds.
That's exactly it. It was this natural hub where you had the trans-Saharan desert routes coming down from the north.
Meeting the river traffic.
Exactly, meeting the river traffic from West and Central Africa. So goods coming from the desert, primarily this incredibly valuable rock salt, had to be offloaded here to meet the river traffic, bringing gold, grain, ivory, you name it, from the south. The city functioned as this non-negotiable transfer point.
And that connection to the river has always been a bit of an Achilles heel, hasn't it? The actual port, Kibara, is 8 kilometers south, but the sources emphasize that river access is perpetually under threat from the environment itself.
It's a constant battle against the land. I mean, while the Niger River's flood, which is fed by heavy rains way down in Guinea and Ivory Coast, is immense, and it peaks around Timbuktu in late December.
Right.
The physical connection through Kibara suffers from severe siltation. Over time, sand and river sediment just fill the channels, essentially choking off its access to deep water navigation.
That sounds like a constant, extremely expensive maintenance problem. Did this geological reality lead to major human intervention?
Oh, absolutely. The need to keep that connection open has been a driving force throughout its history. I mean, even into the colonial era. Our sources detail the period between 1917 and 1921 when the French colonial administration used slave labor to dig a new direct canal.
Just to link Timbuktu with the port.
Just to link it with Kibara. That effort alone shows you how vital they considered that water access to be.
But those channels don't stay open for long in a desert environment, do they?
No, they don't. That colonial canal became severely silted over the next decades, once again isolating Timbuktu from its lifeline. We even see a modern echo of this struggle in 2007.
What happened then?
There was a Libyan-funded dredging project to re-excavate that same 3-kilometer canal. The aim was to allow larger vessels, like the Kamenev passenger ferries, to reach the port. But even with modern tech, Kibara can often only function as a proper port for a few months a year, mostly December and January, when the river is at its absolute highest.
It's a really powerful reminder that the city's prosperity is built on a very fragile, fleeting connection to water.
It is, a city perpetually on the edge, constantly fighting the Sahara to keep its connection to the river.
Okay, let's move to the city's name itself, which seems just as complex as its geography. The sheer number of spellings, Tenbuk, Fambet, Timbuktu, Tombuktu, that suggests centuries of diverse interactions.
The spellings are like phonetic fingerprints of all the different cultures that interacted with it. Arabic scholars, Berber traders, European explorers. It tells you Timbuktu was always a cosmopolitan place. And what's really revealing is that the toponymy, the study of its name, gives us four competing theories about its origins.
Four different stories.
And each one reflects a different cultural perspective on who founded it or what its first function was.
Let's delve into those because they offer such distinct narratives.
So first we have the Songhay origin. This was widely accepted by early travelers. It suggests the name came from tin, meaning wall, and butu, which is often translated as hole or womb in the Songhay language.
So the Wall of the Hollow, that speaks to it being a stable, protected settlement from the start.
Exactly. The second major theory is the Berber origin, which is often championed by Malian historians. This uses the Tuareg language, and it reflects the consensus that Tuareg nomads were the first to set up a seasonal camp there. In Tuareg, tin is a feminine particle meaning place of, and buksu translates to small dune.
So, plates covered by small dunes.
Place covered by small dunes. It's much more literal given the environment. It suggests the earliest settlement was just a cluster of shelters among the shifting sands.
Right. And then we get to the most famous and maybe romanticized explanation, the one from the Tariq al-Sudan.
Yes, the local legend, the story of the slave woman.
Tell us that one.
The legend goes that when Tuareg nomads would leave for their seasonal journeys, they would leave a specific slave woman to look after their goods. Her name was Timbuktu, meaning the one having a lump in the local language, maybe referring to a physical trait. And so the spot just became known as Timbuktu, named after its faithful guardian.
That legend, whether it's true or not, it provides such a wonderful human anchor for the city's beginnings, this small, trusted depot that grows into a massive capital.
It certainly explains the name in a memorable story, which is common in oral histories. And then finally, we have a fourth theory from the French Orientalist René Basset. He suggests a Zanaga root, which is an ancient Berber language. This theory derives the name from the root BKT, meaning to be distant or hidden. Again, pointing to its remote, hollow location that made it hard to spot in the desert.
So the city is defined as a hidden depression, a place of small dunes, a walled enclosure, and named after the person who guarded it. The very origin story is complex, which is fitting for a city that became such a crossroads.
And we have to acknowledge that this ambiguity is there because the desert has literally swallowed the earliest physical evidence. Meters of sand make archaeology within the modern city incredibly difficult. But we do have proof of deep prehistory.
That's right. The sources mentioned earlier settlements.
Archaeological surveys have uncovered Iron Age settlements nearby, near the ancient Wadi system, El Amar, dating all the way back to the 5th century BC. This is vital. Timbuktu didn't just spring into existence in the 12th century. It was a strategically important site that was reborn as a trade center, built on land that has sustained human life for over 2,000 years.
Let's move to that golden age then, the era that created the legend. This period largely spanned the 13th through the 16th centuries, starting under the powerful Mali Empire.
This was the time of immense prosperity. And while the city flourished under Mali's control, the pivotal moment that really launched Timbuktu onto the world stage was the legendary Hajj of Mansa Musa around 1325.
His pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yes, and it was not just a religious obligation. It was a strategic exercise in marketing the wealth and power of the Mali Empire.
He wasn't subtle about his wealth either. The stories of him just giving away gold in Cairo are almost unbelievable.
They're breathtaking. But the sources show that Mansa Musa wasn't just dispensing gold. He was strategically investing in intellectual capital. On his way back, he recruited architects, engineers, and most importantly, scholars from across the Islamic world and brought them back to Timbuktu.
So he seeded the city with talent.
That single act cemented Timbuktu's reputation as the preeminent center of learning in West Africa.
And that influx of talent and capital, Bono, Tuaregs, Fulanis, Songhais, all converging for trade and education, that must have led to explosive growth.
It did. Scholars estimate the medieval peak population may have reached an astonishing 100,000 residents.
100,000. For comparison, what is it today?
In 2018, the population was just over 32,000. So in its golden age, Timbuktu was an immense metropolis, thriving on trade and, crucially, its intellectual infrastructure.
And that trade was built on what we call the legendary commodities, gold, ivory, and salt.
Mm.
When we talk about the economic engine, which one provided the sustained structural wealth that supported everything else?
It's interesting. While the gold from the south is what captivated the Mediterranean world and Europe, the truly essential economic spine of Timbuktu, the item that made all other trade possible, was salt.
It's a fascinating twist of economic history that rock salt was often traded ounce for ounce for gold in the South.
Its importance cannot be overstated. I mean, it was crucial for human and animal health, for preserving meat in a pre-refrigeration era. And this salt was mined from Taudeni, a deep desert center located 664 kilometers, that's 413 miles north, in the central Sahara.
The logistics to move that must have been staggering.
Just staggering. This brings us to the famous Azalai.
The salt caravans. Give us some context on the scale of these.
The Azalai were not just a few donkeys. They were enormous, highly organized camel caravans, sometimes consisting of several thousand animals. This was a brutal, epic undertaking. The round trip to Taudeni and back took about 6 weeks, 3 weeks each way across some of the world's most desolate terrain.
And what were they transporting?
Massive slabs of rock salt. Each camel would be loaded with 4 or 5 30-kilogram slabs. This constant, high-volume flow of salt south was Timbuktu's primary source of economic leverage. It gave the city immense power. Leo Africanus's observation really drives this point home.
Tell us more about that because it captures the imbalance perfectly.
Africanus reported that salt was so rare and so desperately needed south of the desert that it sold for an astronomical price, 80 ducats a load. Now, a ducat was a major European gold coin. That price tells you everything about the necessity of the commodity and the hazardous nature of the supply route.
The value was in the transportation, not the material itself.
Exactly. And this incredible gold-like value of salt is what drew the attention of the wider world and fueled those early European accounts, which, as we know, ended up distorting the city's reality.
That distortion is fundamental to the Timbuktu myth. The most influential account came from Leo Africanus.
A fascinating figure. Born in Granada, captured by pirates, given to Pope Leo X, he was then baptized and commissioned to write the comprehensive Descrizione dell'Africa.
And this book became Europe's primary source of knowledge about West Africa for nearly 2 centuries. It defined the legend.
It did, because in his description, Africanus focused heavily on the king's vast riches, feeding into that European hunger for exotic gold. He wrote explicitly of the royal treasury. Many plates and scepters of gold, some whereof weigh 1,300 pounds. He detailed the state's sophistication, noting the maintenance of 3,000 horsemen and a great store of doctors, judges, priests, and other learned men.
But if his goal was a detailed survey, why focus so heavily on the gold scepters while almost ignoring the housing? Was he intentionally feeding the myth?
It's likely a combination of his own biases and knowing his audience. European readers would have stripped out the context anyway, focusing only on the glittering details. The crucial counterpoint that everyone ignored was his observation that the common city was built of cottages built of chalk and covered with thatch.
So the wealth wasn't in the architecture?
The true wealth was in the trade and the intellectual capital. But gold makes for a much better story back in Rome.
That distinction is so important. Now, fast forward to the late 18th century, and Timbuktu is still a prize. The sources mention the account of the merchant Shabani.
Shabani's story is incredible. He was a merchant who arrived in the city in the late 18th century. After his Hajj, he was captured by Barbary pirates and eventually found his way to England, where his story was recorded in 1789.
And his account was valuable because he wasn't a European explorer. He was part of the trade network.
Exactly. He knew the system. His estimate of the native population alone was 40,000, not including slaves or foreigners, which proves the city was still substantial long after its peak. But what he described also gives us a shocking clue about environmental change.
What was the shock?
He described the environment as characterized by forest.
A forest.
Forest, which is just a world away from the arid, sand-choked desert we see today. It implies massive environmental degradation happened relatively recently, further compounding the city's modern struggles.
The desert truly consumed it. But what caused the decline from the Golden Age, even before the desert closed in?
It was a catastrophic military defeat coupled with shifting global trade. The first major blow was the Moroccan invasion in 1591. The Moroccan army, armed with firearms, defeated the Songhai Empire. Timbuktu was occupied and looted.
And they targeted the city's real commodity, its intellectual heart.
Precisely. The new rulers executed or exiled thousands of Timbuktu's leading scholars and judges in 1593, shattering the city's academic prestige. And then after 1612, the new rulers became basically independent in Morocco, but this just led to instability and conflict.
And at the same time, the world economy was fundamentally restructuring.
Yes. The 17th century saw the massive expansion of maritime trade. Increased competition from transatlantic sailing routes meant European traders could now get West African goods like gold and ivory by sea, bypassing the hazardous trans-Saharan routes entirely.
So Timbuktu's strategic bottleneck location, which had been its superpower,
Was rendered far less important. Its fate was sealed when the French incorporated it into the colony of Sudan in the 1890s.
when we talk about Timbuktu's actual enduring legacy, the true gold, we're talking about its status as an academic center, a world center of Islamic learning, often compared to places like Oxford or Athens.
And the comparison is deserved, though structure was different. Timbuktu didn't have a single unified campus. It operated on a decentralized medieval university model. Knowledge was gathered and disseminated through hundreds of informal institutions called madrasas.
How extensive was this network at its peak?
It was immense. The three main institutions, Djingaribur, Sidiaya, and Senghor, were the largest, but they were hubs for a whole network. In total, this system accommodated an estimated 25,000 students.
A quarter of the city's population were students.
A massive intellectual community, and what they studied wasn't just religious dogma. While theology and Quranic studies were foundational, the curriculum was expansive. It covered history, rhetoric, logic, astronomy, advanced mathematics, and notably, medicine.
How is this all supported in a trading city with so much instability?
It relied heavily on family patronage and endowments from wealthy merchants and judges. They would use their trade fortunes to fund the institutions. And literacy, but especially owning books, became the ultimate symbol of wealth, power, and prestige.
So books became the most valuable commodity.
Absolutely. The acquisition of manuscripts became an obsession. There was an incredibly active book trade, with texts written locally or imported at great expense from Cairo, Baghdad, Cordoba.
This book culture created the incredible volume of texts we know about today. What is the scale of this written African history?
The sheer number is hard to grasp. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts were collected, copied, and archived over centuries. Today, libraries like the Ahmed Baba Institute and the Mama Haidara Library hold up to 700,000 manuscripts.
And these documents are the written proof of medieval West African intellectual life.
They are the best written accounts we have of pre-colonial African history, law, politics, science, you name it. They provide a vital counter-narrative to Eurocentric histories, and their survival is just a testament to the local population's dedication.
Because they survived centuries of decline and invasion by being physically hidden.
Yes, they were secreted away, hidden in cellars, buried in metal containers in the sand, or even plastered over inside the thick mud brick walls of mosques and homes. The scholarly families treated these manuscripts as irreplaceable treasures.
Which brings us to the modern crisis and the incredible act of cultural preservation during the 2012 takeover by the MNLA and the Islamist group Ansar Dine.
That moment brought the centuries-long threat to a terrifying head. When the extremist groups seized control, they viewed the ancient mausoleums and the scholarly traditions as idolatry, as shirk, and they sought to destroy these symbols of Timbuktu's heritage.
But the greatest tragedy was averted by massive, coordinated, and dangerous grassroots efforts.
It was an act of heroism. In January 2013, when troops began retaking the city, the rebels, in a final act of spite, set fire to the Ahmed Baba Institute. They destroyed about 30,000 manuscripts.
Which is a tragedy.
A terrible tragedy. But that was only a fraction of the total. The critical detail is that approximately 90% of Timbuktu's privately held manuscripts had already been safely removed before the rebels attacked.
How did they manage to move hundreds of thousands of documents out of a war zone?
It was a highly clandestine, massive logistical undertaking organized by individuals like Abdelkader Haidara and the local NGO Savama DCI. They relied entirely on private funds and immense personal risk.
What were the logistics? How did they do it?
It was low-tech and determined. They purchased nearly 2,500 standard metal footlockers. Each locker could hold up to 300 manuscripts. These were distributed to trusted families, filled with texts hidden in safe houses, and then, under the cover of darkness, they were slowly transported out of the city, often by donkey or boat, to safety in the capital. Bamako.
That is just astonishing. The international news focused on the 30,000 burned manuscripts, but the real story is the silent, organized effort that saved the other 300,000.
It proves that Timbuktu's true custodians, the scholarly families and the local community, were determined to protect their history no matter the cost.
Turning now to Timbuktu today. The contrast between that historical glory and its modern reality is just stark. It's a city of immense poverty, besieged by environmental and security crises.
It's fighting a two-front war against human conflict and relentless geography. The city is being actively swallowed by the desert. It is literally surrounded by encroaching sand dunes.
Looking at the climate data, the heat alone is brutal. Average daily maximums over 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, for months on end.
And that heat is compounded by the perpetual sand problem. Streets are regularly buried. They have to constantly clear them just to move. And then there's the seasonal harmattan haze, that dry, dusty wind that just deposits more and more sand.
So rain-fed agriculture is impossible. The entire population relies on the Niger River, but they've developed unique methods for survival.
They have. The indigenous strategy revolves around African floating rice. It's a remarkable form of agriculture. The farmers sow the seeds before the flood, and as the river rises, the rice plants can grow up to 3 meters in height, keeping their heads above water.
So they're harvesting rice from a canoe, 3 meters above the ground.
Exactly. It's a method uniquely adapted to the environment. Nowadays, most local production is in irrigated areas, using Archimedes screws to pump water. But even this is largely subsistence farming for the families themselves.
And this instability has decimated tourism, which was a key economic driver.
The collapse was dramatic. Timbuktu is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its ancient mud brick architecture, the 3 great mosques, the mausoleums.
And for years, those sites were a major draw.
They were, but starting around 2008, kidnappings of Western tourists began to increase in the region, and the effect was immediate and devastating. Tourist arrivals dropped from around 6,000 in 2009 to less than 500 in early 2011. The economy took a massive blow.
This vulnerability set the stage for the devastating cultural destruction in 2012 by Ansar Dine.
They systematically targeted the very symbols of the World Heritage Site. They destroyed numerous mausoleums with shovels and pickaxes, declaring them idolatry, a deviation from pure Islamic practice.
Which happened right after the city was placed back on UNESCO's list of World Heritage in Danger.
A tragic race against time. The international response was critical, and UNESCO created a fund to safeguard the sites. The reconstruction efforts that followed were organized locally, using the same local masons and ancient mud brick techniques.
And unfortunately, the security situation remains critically volatile. This is not just history, it's an ongoing reality.
The sources confirm this. The situation escalated dramatically in August 2023 when the city was placed under a total blockade by the terrorist group JNM. This cut off essential supplies, causing severe food shortages and massive displacement. We know 33,000 people fled.
And the conflict continues to target key infrastructure. We have a very recent event cited.
Yes. On June 2nd, 2025, JNM militants targeted a military base with a car bomb and simultaneously shelled the Timbuktu airport with mortars. This shows they are actively undermining the government's control and targeting the very points of access necessary to break the blockade and provide aid. Timbuktu is fighting for its very survival.
Yet despite this danger, cultural and spiritual life persists. The people are resilient.
They absolutely are. The annual Maulud Festival, celebrating the Prophet Muhammad's birthday, is one of the most important occasions, and it involves the public reading of the city's most cherished manuscripts.
That's a powerful statement. Amid blockades and attacks, they gathered to publicly celebrate and read their written heritage.
It reinforces that knowledge remains at the core of the city's identity. And while bigger festivals have had to relocate, local initiatives like the Living Together Festival reinforce that community resilience.
So finally, infrastructure and language. How does a city so remote maintain any connections to the outside world?
Access is limited and challenging. It's boat, road, or air. Boats use the Niger River. Road connections are notoriously poor, though a new paved road is under construction. The airport provides the only regular access with flights to Bamako.
And the language?
The lingua franca today is Koya Chini, a Songhay language. But Arabic remains critically important. It's the language of scholarship and religion, sort of like the role of Latin in medieval Europe, maintaining that historical link to the wider Islamic world.
We began this deep dive by challenging the notion that Timbuktu is just a metaphor. What we've learned is that its power stemmed entirely from its strategic, fragile location at the junction of the gold and salt trade.
And we've seen that it's true, enduring wealth was never the physical goal that mesmerized Europe, but the intellectual capital. It sustained this incredibly sophisticated system of madrasas and preserved a legacy of up to 700,000 manuscripts.
And in the modern era, Timbuktu is defined by its fight for survival against the crushing sand of the desert and the destructive ideology of extremists.
Understanding Timbuktu helps us to fundamentally contextualize the complexity and academic fervor of medieval West Africa, moving us away from simplistic narratives that often overlook the continent's contributions.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and a final thought for you to carry forward. Despite the immense modern struggles, the blockades, the poverty, the destruction of revered sites, the collective heroic effort to save hundreds of thousands of texts means that Timbuktu's history is not just preserved in crumbling mud architecture. It remains a living, active, and accessible intellectual heritage.
So if knowledge, law, history, and culture are considered the highest and most valuable of all human commodities, then the question remains: is Timbuktu, in its truest and most profound sense, still a golden city? The answer, secured within those thousands of metal footlockers, might very well be yes.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are doing a deep dive into one of the most powerful and contradictory places on Earth, Mumbai.
The maximum city.
Exactly. It's not just India's financial and cultural powerhouse. It's this profound study in urban ambition where you have dizzying wealth right up against crushing density.
And it's all built on a foundation that literally had to be carved out of the sea.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to trace that complex beginning. You know, how a remote archipelago was physically merged into a single landmass. And then explore how that dramatic transformation still shapes its economy, its infrastructure, its vulnerability, and, its whole identity as a global city.
An alpha world city, yeah.
And to kick things off, let's start with a fact that just completely changes your mental map of Mumbai.
I love this part.
It didn't start as the massive peninsula you see on a map today. Not even close. It began as an archipelago.
A cluster of islands.
A cluster of 7 distinct, separate islands, just sort of floating off the Konkan coast. These are the Isle of Bombay, Parel, Mazagon, Mahim, Kalaba, Worli, and Old Woman's Island.
Sometimes called Little Kalaba.
Right. And trying to superimpose that image onto the, the hyper-dense continuous city of today it's genuinely mind-boggling.
It really is. It forces you to appreciate the scale of the human effort that went into just making the place. And as you mentioned, the city's complexity isn't just geographical. It's woven right into the very name it uses.
Oh, absolutely.
That tension between its colonial past and its post-colonial present is right there in the two names. Bombay and Mumbai.
That tension is so palpable even now. So let's get into the etymology, because the names themselves tell a whole political story.
They absolutely do. The official modern name, Mumbai, has these deep indigenous roots.
Okay.
It's derived from Mumba, or Maha Amba, which is the name of the patron Hindu goddess, Mumba Devi. She's been revered for centuries by the native Koli fishing community.
The original inhabitants.
The very first inhabitants of those 7 islands. And you combine that with the Marathi word O, which means mother.
So Mother Mumba's place.
Essentially, yes. In stark contrast, you have Bombay, the older name.
Which is the one a lot of people outside India might still know.
Right, and it's an anglicized version of the name the Portuguese gave it, Bombame, which is thought to mean something like good bay.
So the decision to drop that anglicized name, that wasn't just a simple correction. It was a huge politically charged statement in the mid-90s.
That's right. The shift was really driven by the rise of the Marathi Nationalist Party, Shiv Sena, after they won the state elections.
I see.
They spearheaded the move to officially change the English name to Mumbai in November 1995.
Yeah.
This was like a core part of their whole ideology.
Which was about what, exactly?
About strengthening Marathi Asmita, which means pride or identity, by dismantling what they saw as these unwanted linguistic legacies of British colonial rule. To them, Bombay was a foreign corruption.
And that sparked a huge debate, I imagine.
Oh, a massive debate. While the name change was accepted and, promoted by the government, for many longtime residents, especially the city's older cosmopolitan business elite,
Hmm.
using the name Bombay was just a habit. Or, for some, even a subtle political statement of their own. It's a classic example of how a city's identity can become a battleground for history and politics.
And while all this identity stuff was playing out, the physical foundation of the city, that was a miracle of engineering from centuries before.
That's right.
We talk about the indigenous rulers, the Koli people, then the Maurya Empire, but the European chapter really set the stage for the physical merger.
Indeed. The islands eventually fell under the control of the Portuguese Empire in the 16th century, and then comes one of the most astonishing real estate transactions in history.
This is the dowry.
This is the dowry. In 1661, these 7 strategically vital islands were passed to the English East India Company as part of the dowry of Catherine of Braganza when she married King Charles II of England.
A literal archipelago as a wedding gift. It's just wild. It gave the English this crucial foothold on India's western coast.
Exactly.
And this is where the sheer ambition kicks in, right?
Oh,
It set a precedent for the city's ability to just defy geography. Once the English took over, they realized the archipelago setup was a major problem for creating a real deep-water port.
a port that could truly rival others, yeah.
Yeah.
They had to solve this problem of 7 islands separated by marshland and tidal creeks.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does. The man credited with starting the truly foundational work was William Hornby, the governor of Bombay. Though it was a process that took, well, generations, the solution was the Hornby-Villard project.
And a vellard is what, exactly?
It's essentially an embankment or a causeway, something you build to keep the sea out. This was a massive civil engineering scheme that began way back in 1782.
So they weren't just connecting the dots between islands, they were actively, aggressively reclaiming land from the sea.
Precisely. They started systematically filling in the low-lying, swampy areas, the tidal flats that separated the islands. This project was colossal for its time. It took a while, but by 1845, the vast majority of the 7 islands had been merged into a single, unified landmass.
Creating that long, narrow peninsula we recognize today.
And that was crucial. It allowed for the construction of major continuous roads and, later, the all-important railway lines.
So that geographic merger fundamentally created the city as we know it.
It did.
It allowed the English East India Company, and later the British Raj, to establish Mumbai as the main seaport on the Arabian Sea, especially after the Suez Canal opened in 1869.
Right, which made the city a critical node on the global trade map.
It was an exercise in pure will, building the foundation of a future megacity by just claiming territory from the ocean.
And that act of creation, while it was so successful, had these critical long-term consequences.
You mean with flooding?
Exactly. By creating land from the sea, they inherently made these large tracts of low-lying terrain that are perpetually vulnerable to drainage issues and flooding. A problem we see magnified today with the climate. That engineered foundation is also what limits the city's expansion, which leads directly to the density crisis we see now. That ambition set the stage for Mumbai to become this sprawling metropolis of over 12 million people.
And over 23 million in the wider metropolitan region.
Yeah, which brings us straight into the economic reality of the city today.
Right. Mumbai is called the maximum city because it is, without a doubt, the engine that drives India. It's absolutely earned its comparison to alpha world cities like New York.
The concentration of commercial and financial activity it's staggering. If you look at the raw numbers, Mumbai generates a substantial 6.16% of India's total GDP.
6% from one city.
From one city. But it's not just the amount of money, it's what that money represents in terms of industrial and trade output.
Okay, think about this. Mumbai accounts for an astonishing 25% of the entire nation's industrial output. 1/4.
And the really definitive numbers are in finance and logistics.
The city handles 70% of India's maritime trade,
70%.
flowing through ports like the historic Mumbai Port Trust and the newer JNPT. And financially, it processes 70% of all capital transactions flowing through the entire Indian economy.
I mean, that is an absolute overwhelming concentration of economic power in one single place.
And that concentration, it's structural, right?
It's completely structural. Mumbai is literally the headquarters for the whole scaffolding of the Indian financial system. It hosts the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank.
Okay.
Then you have SEBI, the main financial market regulator, the National Stock Exchange, and of course, the famous Bombay Stock Exchange on Dalal Street.
Which is Asia's oldest stock exchange, right?
The oldest, dating back to 1875. The sheer physical proximity of all these institutions, regulators, and exchanges creates this incredibly powerful financial ecosystem with a global reach.
That dominant identity, though, it had to evolve pretty dramatically, especially in the late 20th century. The sources describe this profound economic pivot.
Oh, absolutely. A huge shift. For over a century, Mumbai's prosperity relied heavily on its traditional industries. The seaport and the huge textile mills.
The cotton mills of India.
That's what they were called. This industrial base employed hundreds of thousands of workers, many of them living in these crowded tenements called chawls.
But the turning point was that massive 1982 Great Bombay textile strike.
It was. This dispute involved nearly 250,000 workers across 50 mills. It dragged on for years, and in the end, it just crippled the industry. The textile mills largely failed and disappeared.
And the land those mills sat on became the focus of this intense politically charged redevelopment.
Yes, and this is where the social and economic geography of modern Mumbai was really fought over. Those defunct mill lands were incredibly valuable because they were right in the center of the peninsula.
Prime real estate.
The best. There was a fierce battle over who had the right to develop it. The government, the mill owners, or the thousands of displaced workers who wanted affordable housing where they once worked.
And what was the outcome?
Ultimately, most of that land was redeveloped into high-rise commercial properties, malls, luxury residences. This whole process just cemented the city's pivot toward the service sectors.
So things like finance, engineering, diamond polishing, healthcare, IT.
And critically, the global entertainment industry we know is Bollywood.
That shift created these two distinct financial geographies. You had the historic core, but then these new glistening centers popped up.
Exactly. Nariman Point is still crucial, but the Bandra Kurla complex, or BKC, was designed specifically as a modern planned financial center to house all the global banking and IT headquarters.
And all that activity translates into just monumental personal wealth.
It does. Mumbai is the wealthiest Indian city, with an estimated total wealth approaching $1 trillion, around $960 billion, based on 2024 data.
And here's a wild measure of its pull on global capital. It has the third highest number of billionaires in the world.
Third highest.
So what does this all mean? It means intense, immediate, visible inequality. That vast, concentrated wealth exists right next door to some of the most extreme examples of urban poverty on the planet.
That visual and spatial contrast is maybe the single defining feature of the city. You have the concentration of wealth, for instance, along Altamont Road, India's Billionaires Row.
Right.
Yet, at the same time, the data shows that 41.8% of the city's population lives in urban slums, which, incredibly, occupy only about 7% of the total land area.
But that ratio is just.
Yeah.
It creates unbelievable pressure. And you can't talk about Mumbai's housing crisis without talking about Dharavi.
No, you can't. Dharavi, located right in the center, is a global icon of informal urbanization. It's often cited as Asia's second largest slum.
And it houses somewhere between 800,000 to 1 million people in a shockingly small area.
To put that density into perspective for you, it's estimated at a staggering 334,728 inhabitants per square kilometer.
Wow.
That kind of density. You just don't see that anywhere else in the world.
And the paradox of Dharavi is that despite the cramped conditions, the lack of formal infrastructure, it supports this vibrant, hyper-local economy.
It's an economic miracle in its own right. Dharavi is home to a massive recycling industry. It processes a phenomenal amount of recyclable waste for the entire city.
Like plastics, metals, cardboard.
All of it. It contains an estimated 15,000 single-room factories and workshops involved in everything from leather goods to pottery. Conservative estimates put the total annual turnover of this informal economy somewhere between 600 million and over $1 billion.
So it's an engine of livelihood, operating with incredible efficiency despite everything.
It is. But the reality of scarcity really dictates daily life for most Mumbaikars. The overall residential area per person in Mumbai is just 8.3 square meters.
Which is already small by global standards.
Very small. And in the slums, where almost half the city lives, that space shrinks dramatically, sometimes to as little as 2.73 square meters per person.
This scarcity is directly linked back to that geographical constraint we talked about. The city is a fixed peninsula. It can't just sprawl outwards.
No, it has to grow upward and densify inward. And it keeps attracting migrants seeking opportunity from every corner of India. This relentless influx also produces a fascinating demographic detail, the low sex ratio.
Right. You cited a statistic, 848 females per 1,000 males in Greater Mumbai. That's way lower than the national average. What does that imbalance tell us?
It suggests that a high number of individuals, mostly men, are doing what's called circular migration. They move to Mumbai just for work, accepting the difficult living conditions, but they leave their families behind in their native towns or villages.
So it creates this temporary workforce that's less rooted in the community.
Exactly. And it puts immense social and financial strain on families that are separated by this search for a livelihood. It's what drives the rapid growth forecast. The number of households was projected to jump from 4.2 million in 2008 to a projected 6.6 million in 2020, continually straining resources.
And that transition takes us perfectly into the city's lifeblood, the climate and the systems of movement. The same geography that created a world-class port also made the city intensely vulnerable.
That low elevation is a constant menace. Mumbai sits on the Konkan coast, mostly on Salsette Island, and its average elevation is just 14 meters above sea level.
Which is nothing.
It's nothing. And you combine that low profile with its tropical wet and dry climate defined by that devastating southwest monsoon from June to September, and it means the city is constantly battling the elements.
So we're back to that engineering project from 150 years ago. The problem isn't just the rain, it's the actual structure of the city, right?
Precisely. The land reclamation that merged the 7 islands created these extensive low-lying plains and filled in marshlands. These areas, they lack natural slopes and struggle immensely with drainage. And the flooding is made worse by climate change, sure, but also by unplanned drainage, poor waste management blocking the drains, and informal settlements built on the most vulnerable, lowest ground.
We have to mention the most dramatic example of this. The sheer volume of water that can fall in a single day is almost unbelievable.
The record was a catastrophic 944 millimeters or 37 inches on July 26, 2005.
One day.
In a single day. That event was a city-stopping disaster. It caused widespread disruption, infrastructure damage estimated at $1.2 billion US, and tragically, between 500 and 1,000 deaths.
Mostly in the informal settlements.
Mostly there, and due to flooded transport systems. The Mithi River, which is a major drainage channel, just swelled uncontrollably. That event is a stark reminder that the city is in a constant battle against the very geography it created.
And yet, despite those constraints, the city has managed to build this heroic, hyper-efficient system of movement, which is the key to its whole economic function.
It's the absolute lifeblood. Without its public transport, Mumbai would simply stop. The suburban railway, the famous locals, and the best buses accounted for roughly 88% of all passenger traffic back in 2008.
Let's focus on the suburban railway, the locals. That really is the backbone of the city's mobility.
It is. It's managed by 2 zones. The Central Railway, headquartered at Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, and the Western Railway, headquartered at Churchgate.
The scale is just colossal.
It's huge. In 2007, the locals carried 6.3 million passengers every single day.
Wow.
But the stat that really captures the struggle and the efficiency of the system is the passenger density. A typical train is designed to comfortably carry about 1,700 passengers.
So
During peak hours, those same trains regularly carry around 4,500 people.
4,500.
This gives Mumbai the highest passenger density of any urban railway system in the world. It's a phenomenon known locally as the super dense crush load.
I think it's important for you to get a sense of the physical reality of that.
Yeah.
It's not just crowded. It's a form of intensely efficient, highly structured chaos.
Absolutely. It's a culture of movement. People literally hang out of the open doors, timing their entry and exit with millisecond precision.
Yeah.
And yet, miraculously, the system mostly works. And crucially, the trains also act as a social engine. They have distinct ladies-only compartments, which provide a vital and often safer mode of transport for the massive female workforce.
That unrelenting pressure on the locals has forced major investment in other infrastructure, though.
Yes. Recognizing the system's limits, newer rapid transit systems have been introduced. The Mumbai Metro network, for example, is meant to cut across the peninsula and relieve the burden on the existing north-south rail lines.
And there's the monorail, too.
Right, another piece of that puzzle, connecting specific neighborhoods.
And beyond the rails, the road infrastructure has seen massive projects, too, connecting the main island to the mainland.
2 really stand out. First, the Mumbai-Pune Expressway, which was India's first 6-lane concrete expressway. It was fundamental in linking the city to its economic hinterland.
But the newer project is maybe even more crucial.
The Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, or MTHL, it's also called Atal Setu, a massive 21.8-kilometer sea bridge that just opened in January 2024.
And what's the strategic importance of that bridge?
It connects South Mumbai directly to Navi Mumbai, the planned township across the creek. This is critical because it aims to cut travel time. And, more importantly, it facilitates better connectivity to the JMPT port.
The port that handles most of the modern container traffic.
Exactly. The MT cells is an attempt to decentralize some of that central congestion that has plagued the core peninsula for so long.
That blend of historic systems and cutting-edge engineering really defines Mumbai's relationship with movement. So let's move on to the cultural heart and the aesthetic layers of this incredible place. If finance is the engine, media and entertainment are the lungs.
And that means Bollywood. Mumbai is the undisputed birthplace of Indian cinema. The name Bollywood itself, a mix of Bombay and Hollywood, speaks to its global aspirations and scale.
And the output is just enormous. Bollywood churns out roughly 150 to 200 Hindi-language films a year.
And those films, their stars, they define fashion, music, and social discourse across South Asia and the global Indian diaspora. Major events, like the Filmfare Awards, are national spectacles.
But it's important to note, Mumbai's cinematic influence goes beyond just Hindi films.
That's a great point. It's a critical hub for several other regional film industries, including Marathi, Bengali, and Gujarati cinema. And the city itself often serves as the silent, dramatic character.
We mentioned Slumdog Millionaire, but the city's landscapes are constantly being defined through film.
From busy train platforms to high-rises, yeah.
And the media history runs so deep. The city is also home to Asia's oldest continuously published newspaper, Bombay Samachar, which has been printed in Gujarati since 1822.
That kind of longevity just underscores the profound history of communication and commerce tied to this port city.
So moving from media to the physical canvas of the city, the architecture tells this unique story of blending cultures and eras.
It's not visually homogeneous at all. It's a dramatic layering of styles.
You see this juxtaposition of these monumental styles, Gothic Revival, Indo-Saracenic, and Art Deco. Where can you see the clearest examples of that?
Well, the British legacy is deeply embedded in the Gothic Revival style. You see it in structures from the late 19th century, like the iconic Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus.
Formerly Victoria Terminus.
Right, and the buildings of the University of Mumbai. These were all designed to project colonial authority and grandeur.
And then there's the Indo-Saracenic style,
Which blends Indian, Islamic, and European features. You see that in public monuments like the iconic Gateway of India, standing watch over the harbor.
And then there's the incredible fact about Art Deco. I still find it astonishing that Mumbai has the second highest number of Art Deco buildings in the world.
Second only to Miami. It's a fantastic hidden gem of the city's identity. Art Deco flourished in the 1920s and 30s. These buildings, with their streamlined shapes and geometric motifs, are concentrated mostly along the famous seafront promenades, Marine Drive, and Oval Maidan.
And the existence of this massive, cohesive Art Deco ensemble is a huge point of pride.
And it contributes significantly to the city's 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites: the ancient Elephanta Caves, the Gothic CST, and then the Victorian Gothic and Art Deco ensemble itself.
And the pressure of density, of course, means the building boom hasn't stopped. We talked about the need to build upward.
Exactly. Land is the single most valuable commodity. Mumbai has the highest number of skyscrapers in India, with hundreds of existing towers and many more under construction.
Let's talk about the democratic equalizer in Mumbai, street food. It's a cultural phenomenon that seems to cut across all the social barriers we've discussed.
Oh, street food in Mumbai is absolutely central to the city's rhythm. The reason it's so important is sociological. People from all economic classes, from the day laborer to the corporate executive, eat on the roadside.
Often around the clock.
Around the clock, whether it's the famous vada pav, which is like the city's vegetarian slider, or pav bhaji. These foods are cheap. They're everywhere, especially around crowded transport hubs like railway stations.
And the vendors are really credited with developing this whole distinctive democratic food culture.
They are. They provide essential fuel for the city's massive workforce, quickly and affordably.
And finally, we have to touch on the city's undisputed sporting obsession, which is, of course, cricket.
Cricket completely dominates the cultural scene. It's another powerful social glue. Mumbai is the home base for the BCCI, the Board of Control for Cricket in India.
And it has the hugely popular IPL team, the Mumbai Indians.
And its first-class team has won the Ranji Trophy a record 41 times.
Its global importance is measurable, too. The Wankhede Stadium hosted the final of the 2011 ICC Cricket World Cup.
And here's that great bit of trivia. Mumbai and London are the only two cities in the world to have hosted both a World Cup final and the final of an ICC Champions Trophy.
Which just underscores the city's enduring global role in the sport.
That combination of economic power, cultural influence, and sporting obsession really paints the full picture of this intensely driven city.
So let's bring it all back home for our synthesis. We've explored Mumbai as a city forged by sheer will, rising from 7 disparate islands to a massive peninsula through centuries of aggressive engineering.
It's a profound study in paradox. You see phenomenal economic power generating 70% of India's capital transactions, right alongside intense social inequality, where one side of the road hosts billionaires and the other, the super dense working economy of Dharavi.
And its identity is still deeply layered, managing its complex political transition from Bombay to Mumbai, while just continually attracting migrants from all over the continent.
And underpinning this whole complex reality is the constant heroic movement of its millions of residents. They rely on a suburban railway system that defies overcrowding stats every single day.
All while struggling against geographical constraints like the annual monsoon floods, yet continually pushing forward with these massive infrastructure projects like the Trans-Harbor Link.
And this leads us directly to the final provocative thought about the future. The demographic forces are relentless. We talked about the low sex ratio, which indicates this large, temporary male migrant workforce driving up household numbers dramatically. The density is already staggering, forcing the city to build aggressively upward.
The pressure on space, on infrastructure, on public health is only going to keep mounting.
So the essential question for you, the listener, and for the policy planners is this. Considering Mumbai's unique, low-lying geography, its existing staggering density, which is already pushing its public transit to the breaking point, and its inherent vulnerability to catastrophic flooding, how will the maximum city manage to sustain this relentless, unrelenting population growth while also maintaining its crucial economic engine and, most importantly, demonstrably improving the living standards and quality of life for all its current and future Mumbaikars?
Can it maintain its role as India's financial heart without sacrificing the well-being of the very people who power it?
That's the question.
We're truly high-stakes challenge for one of the world's most dynamic, contradictory, and essential cities. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Okay, let's dive in. Today we're focusing on Florence, or, Firenze, the heart of Tuscany. What we really want to do is unpack how this one city, which faced, well, seemingly impossible odds throughout history, became such a powerhouse, an engine for culture, for finance, for Western thought itself. We're tracing its story right from the beginning, like a Roman military camp, all the way up to its role today as a global center.
It really is an incredible story, isn't it? Just full of resilience and creativity. So just to set the scene, Florence today is Tuscany's biggest city. The latest figures, I think, for 2025 put it at about 362,000 people. And its historic heart, the Centro Storico, well, it's been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since back in '82, for very good reason, obviously.
Yeah, and the name itself kind of gives you a hint, doesn't it? Firenze in Italian comes from the Latin Florentia, and Florentia means to blossom, which, when you look at its history, is just perfect. It's this city that got knocked down again and again, a plague, wars, political chaos, but it just kept, well, blossoming back dramatically.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale of its impact for a city its size. I mean, this is the birthplace of the Renaissance, no question. It was also a massive hub for medieval trade and finance, basically setting the standard for money across the continent. And a lot of people forget this. It even had a stint as the capital of the Kingdom of Italy from 1865 to 1871. Just a brief period, but still.
Okay, so if we peel back all the layers, the art, the banking giants, the Medici, what were the actual roots? Where did this blossoming begin?
It started really small and very practical, very military. The Romans founded it way back in 59 BC. It was basically a planned settlement for their veteran soldiers. It wasn't like a town that grew organically. Nope, it was laid out like a classic Roman army camp, a castrum, the grid pattern. And crucially, its location was key right from the start. It sat right on the Via Cassia.
The main road connecting Rome to the north, right?
Exactly. So strategic for trade and movement from day one.
Yeah.
But that early advantage, well, it almost vanished completely during the early Middle Ages.
Yeah, I saw that. Things got really bad for a while there, like near total collapse.
Oh, absolutely devastating. You had the wars between the Ostrogoths and the Byzantines, constant upheaval. It got so bad that the population apparently plummeted to maybe only 1,000 people. Think about that. Just 1,000 people rattling around, basically a ghost town. Florence really only started its comeback when things settled down politically, first under the Lombards, then the Carolingians around the 8th century. That stability allowed people to return, rebuild, and that Florentine industriousness started kicking in again.
And once trade picked up, Florence didn't just rejoin the European economy. It seems like it fundamentally changed the rules of the game. This is where we get into that Florentine knack for innovation, yeah.
Precisely. By around 1100, Florence was operating as this independent city-state, a commune. And it got wealthy, incredibly wealthy, really fast. The key thing is they weren't just trading wool or goods. They were innovating in how business itself was done. Trading money, yes, but also developing systems built on trust. They introduced, well, two huge financial game changers to medieval Europe.
Okay, let's break those down. The bill of exchange, that one makes intuitive sense, right?
Yeah.
Easier and safer than carting gold everywhere. But double entry bookkeeping sounds, frankly, a bit boring. Why was that so revolutionary?
It sounds tedious, I know. But think about it. For the first time, double entry allowed businesses, merchant families, to have a really clear, accurate picture of their finances. You could see precisely what was profit, what was loss, who owed what, across multiple ventures, even internationally. This accuracy gave them the confidence to assess risk properly, to give credit, and importantly, to pool their money for really big investments. It was the bedrock of modern banking, the accounting system that made complex capitalism possible.
Huh. So it wasn't just about counting beans, it was about enabling trust and scale. They basically built the financial operating system, and the currency, the gold florin, that was like the hardware.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, the florin became the gold standard across Europe. Why? Because it was reliable. The Florentine Republic was meticulous about minting coins with incredibly consistent purity and weight. Everyone trusted the florin. So you see Florentine money funding everything from English wars like the Hundred Years' War to the Pope building lavishly in Avignon and Rome. Their banks were financing the continent.
Okay, so that economic dominance then naturally leads to cultural influence. If your money's the best, maybe people start thinking your way of speaking is pretty good too.
That's exactly what happened. It's a fascinating linguistic story. The local dialect, spoken in Florence, became the foundation for what we now call Standard Italian. And it wasn't because Florence conquered everyone or forced it on them. It was purely down to the massive cultural prestige of writers from Tuscany, Dante Alighieri, Petrarch, Giovanni Boccaccio. Their masterpieces, written in the Florentine vernacular, were so influential, so admired, that everyone started imitating their language. It cemented Florence's cultural dominance in a way that lasted long after its peak political power waned.
Amazing. So the money and the words lay the foundation. Now we get to the era everyone pictures when they think of Florence, the 14th to the 16th centuries. Huge power, big drama, and one family name keeps popping up, Medici.
Ugh, the Medici. They're kind of the ultimate masters of soft power, aren't they? Especially Cosimo de' Medici back in the 15th century. He figured out he didn't actually need to be the official ruler, the duke or whatever. He could control the city much more effectively from behind the scenes. How? Through his immense wealth, building this huge network of patronage people who owed him favors and, crucially, by being the Pope's bankers. That gave them enormous leverage.
And then his grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent, he took that power and really turned it into a cultural supernova. This is where Florence becomes synonymous with genius, right?
Lorenzo was brilliant at it. He wasn't just rich. He understood talent and how to nurture it. He was the patron for Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli. He basically curated the high Renaissance. He even brought top composers like Heinrich Isaac to the city. But there was a flip side. All this lavish spending, the political maneuvering, it created this undercurrent of instability. The Medici weren't always popular, and there were several Republican uprisings trying to kick them out.
And the most extreme example of that pushback has to be the Savonarola period. Talk about a complete U-turn from the Medici style.
Oh, it was like a religious earthquake hit the city. The Medici get booted out in 1494, and suddenly this Dominican friar, Girolamo Savonarola, becomes the dominant figure. He was famous for these incredibly fiery sermons, basically condemning everything the Medici stood for, the art, the luxury, this sort of neo-pagan intellectualism. He brought in this really austere, puritanical rule. He pushed through political reforms, but he's most famous for the bonfires of the vanities, getting citizens to burn things considered decadent. Art, books, fancy clothes, musical instruments.
Wow. So Florence goes from being the center of humanism and artistic freedom to this intensely pious, almost fundamentalist state led by a guy calling out the Pope himself. That must have sent shockwaves through the establishment.
It absolutely did. It was terrifying for many.
Mm.
And it showed just how fragile that sophisticated Florentine society could be, how quickly it could swing to extremes. Savonarola didn't pull any punches. He publicly accused Pope Alexander VI, who was, let's be honest, notoriously corrupt, of serious wrongdoing. That was probably his biggest mistake politically.
Sealed his fate, basically.
Pretty much. The political winds shifted, his enemies regrouped, and the Pope wasn't going to stand for it. In 1498, the city authorities turned against him. He was arrested, condemned as a heretic, then hanged and his body burned right there in the Piazza della Signoria. A really brutal end. And that whole episode left a deep mark.
And it's right out of that chaos, that sort of stark lesson in power politics, that we get Machiavelli right. His book, The Prince, feels like a direct reaction to seeing things like Savonarola's rise and fall.
It's exactly. Niccolò Machiavelli was a Florentine official working for the Republic during that turbulent time after Savonarola, but before the Medici came back again. He saw firsthand how power really worked, how rulers gained it, kept it, lost it. The Prince is basically him distilling those often brutal lessons into a practical handbook, how to rule effectively, sometimes setting aside conventional morality to maintain stability and control. It's pure political realism, born from Florentine chaos. And interestingly, even when the Medici did come back to power, they later commissioned Machiavelli to write the Florentine histories. Shows how valuable his intellect was considered, even by those he might have implicitly criticized.
So the Medici kept getting kicked out, but they always seemed to find a way back in, eventually making their rule permanent.
They were persistent, and they were very good at leveraging outside help. They often got support from Spanish forces or the papacy itself, and it certainly didn't hurt that two Medici family members actually became popes. Giovanni became Leo X, and Giulio became Clement VII. That's serious influence. So after all those decades of fighting to be a republic, Florence finally gives in. In 1531, it officially becomes a monarchy, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, ruled by the Medici. And that dynasty lasted for over 2 centuries, until the last Medici ruler died without an heir in 1737. The roller coaster finally stopped.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to what is probably Florence's most enduring legacy globally, being the cradle of the Renaissance, La Culla del Rinascimento. What really defined this artistic explosion, beyond just having talented painters around?
Well, the High Renaissance, which really hits its stride around 1500 to, say, 1527, was more than just pretty pictures. It represented a fundamental shift in thinking. It was about embracing classical ideals, Greek and Roman models, but also focusing intensely on naturalism, on depicting real human emotion, on making art more rational, more individualistic. It was a deliberate move away from the more stylized, often anonymous, formulaic art of the Middle Ages. It was a profound belief in human capability and potential. You see that not just in painting and sculpture, but maybe most dramatically in architecture.
Right. And the ultimate symbol of that has to be the Duomo, that massive dome. It's breathtaking. But the story of how it got built tells you so much about that Florentine spirit of ingenuity, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The dome of Florence Cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, designed and built by Filippo Brunelleschi, it's like the ultimate hold-my-beer moment in architectural history. You see, they started building the cathedral way back in the 13th century. They designed this enormous octagonal space for the dome, knowing full well they had absolutely no idea how to actually roof it. The technology didn't exist. They literally built the base and the walls, just trusting that future generations, future Florentine genius would figure it out.
That's incredible confidence, or maybe madness. So how did Brunelleschi actually solve it? Why wasn't it just a matter of building really big scaffolding like they normally would?
The scale was just too immense. The dome is still the largest brick dome ever constructed. Traditional wooden scaffolding, called centering, would have required a forest's worth of timber, and even then, it likely couldn't have supported the sheer weight of the masonry as it went up. It would have collapsed under its own weight. So Brunelleschi had to invent completely new techniques. He designed a double-shelled dome, an inner shell, and an outer one to reduce weight. He created specialized hoisting machines to lift massive sandstone beams. And crucially, he figured out a way to lay the bricks in a self-supporting herringbone pattern. This meant each ring of bricks locked the previous one in place, allowing the dome to hold itself up as it grew taller. without needing that massive internal support structure. It wasn't just architecture, it was revolutionary engineering.
Wow, solving a problem everyone else thought was impossible. That really captures something essential about Florence. And when you walk around the city today, I mean, you're just constantly bumping into these monuments to that era.
It's saturated with it, isn't it? You've got the Uffizi Gallery, which started as the Medici family's private collection and is now, one of the top 10 most visited art museums on the planet.
Yeah.
Packed with masterpieces.
And the Ponte Vecchio, that bridge lined with shops, is so iconic.
Yeah, and an amazing story of survival, too. It was the only bridge across the Arno in Florence that the retreating German army didn't blow up in World War II. Apparently, even they recognized its unique historical value. And it's got the Vasari corridor running over the top of the shops, that private walkway connecting the Uffizi to the PT Palace. And then, of course, you have Michelangelo's David. The original is safe inside the Galleria dell'Accademia now, though there's a great replica standing out in the Piazza della Signoria where it used to be.
So with all this incredible history, this priceless heritage, what actually powers Florence's economy today? Tourism must be absolutely massive.
Oh, it's number one. Easily the most important industry. Back in 2015, the revenue was estimated at over 2.5 billion euros. That's huge. But Florence isn't just a museum city. It's managed to maintain a diverse economy, too. It's still considered one of the world's top fashion capitals, I think, ranked in the top 15 globally. You've got major luxury brands headquartered there, like Salvatore Ferragamo and Gucci, and it's still a center for high-quality manufacturing. Furniture, leather goods, rubber products, and let's not forget food and wine. The Chianti region is right on its doorstep.
That creates a real tension, though, doesn't it? Being the cradle of the Renaissance is amazing, but how do you cope when literally millions of people want to come and rock that cradle every year?
That is the challenge for historic cities like Florence, Venice, Rome. Managing success. Especially from April through October, the peak season, tourists can actually outnumber the local residents in the city center. That leads to serious overcrowding, strain on infrastructure, and sometimes, sadly, a lack of respect for the very heritage people have come to see.
Right, and this is where you see the city trying to innovate again, but in a very modern, almost defensive way, echoes of that old Florentine problem-solving.
Exactly. You see city officials like the mayor Dario Nardella trying different tactics. Some have been a bit controversial, or at least got a lot of press, like spraying water on the steps of historic churches to stop tourists from sitting down and eating their packed lunches there. But perhaps more significantly, you see things like the city council rejecting McDonald's application to open a restaurant right in the Piazza del Duomo, the main cathedral square. That was a clear statement. Preserving the historic character and promoting traditional food culture sometimes has to trump pure commercial interests. It's about resisting that kind of global homogenization to keep Florence, well, Florence.
It's just an incredible arc when you step back and look at it. From that basic Roman camp through becoming this financial and artistic super innovator, surviving devastating events like the Black Death. I mean, the plague in 1348 wiped out more than half the population. That's the context for Boccaccio writing the Decameron, people telling stories while hiding from the plague, and then navigating centuries of political backstabbing and warfare.
And yet, through all of that, they hold on to these really unique, sometimes quite fierce, local traditions. They still play Calcio Storico Fiorentino, that incredibly violent historical form of football, almost like rugby meets street fighting right in the Piazza di Santa Croce. It's brutal, but it's pure Florentine pride. Or the Scoppio del Carro, the explosion of the cart on Easter Sunday. This massive, centuries-old cart packed with fireworks is hauled to the Duomo and set off by a mechanical dove flying down a wire from the high altar. It commemorates the First Crusade. These aren't just quaint folk customs. They're powerful public displays of a continuous identity.
So thinking about all this for you, the listener, we started with that name, Florentia, to blossom. And we know the climate there, sort of humid, subtropical, tending towards Mediterranean, allows for growth almost year-round. When you consider everything Florence has endured, catastrophic floods like the big one in 1966, wars, pandemics, constant political turmoil, what's the core lesson here? Is there something in that Florentine spirit, maybe captured in that original name, that allows it to just keep reblossoming and punching above its weight on the world stage?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? I think if you connect all the dots, the lesson goes beyond just they had great artists. It's about a deep-seated culture of systemic innovation, whether it's Brunelleschi inventing engineering solutions on the fly because the old ways wouldn't work for his dome, or the early merchants inventing double-entry bookkeeping and a reliable currency to make large-scale trade feasible. Florence seems to teach us that enduring influence comes from repeatedly tackling the impossible problems. It's about leveraging intellectual capital, creativity, and frankly, a certain stubborn resilience. Long after your purely military or political dominance might have faded, they keep finding new ways to flourish.
A city designed to blossom because its people were always figuring out a smarter path forward. A powerful thought to leave you with.